What's up guys, this is Keir from strengthcoachnetwork.com. If you've been following the channel, you'll know that a few days ago, I put out a video giving my thoughts on some Navy SEAL style training that the GIlgronis were doing as part of their preseason preparation for the forthcoming year. If you've not seen that video yet, click the card for me and watch that video and you can get an idea of what I'm going to be talking about in this video. What you're going to see in this video is actually about 7 minutes or so of some additional footage that I cut from the original video. One reason for this is that once the length of the video starts to get over that kind of 12, 13, 14, 15 minutes in length, people just do not watch that part of the video, so it would have been wasted anyway. The second reason for this video is that I'm often cited as saying, don't tell me about the pain of labor, just give me the baby. Your solutions offered to complaints made needs to be greater than a ratio of 1-to-1, otherwise you're an oxygen thief. And obviously, it would be remiss of me to put out a video saying, well, I think this is shit for all these different reasons, and not actually provide an alternative solution as to how I think things should be done. So for that reason, and the fact that numerous people have asked me on and offline, well, how should it be done? How should we develop mental toughness with rugby athletes? I thought I would put up another video to include this footage that I did not put in the original video. Obviously, I am a strength and conditioning coach by trade. It's what I'm most well known for. And for that reason, I provide a lot of examples on the physical side of training when discussing the principles that I talk about in this video. However, we should be aware that these principles are universal in nature and they apply to all aspects of sporting preparation. In order to progress and get to a higher level of performance, whether it's physical, tactical, technical, psychological, there must be a logical and progressive increase in the difficulty of what we're exposing our athletes to. And in order to do that, you have to understand the different parameters of each exercise that you expose your athletes to and how to manipulate these variables that you're pushing your athletes to the point where they're bending but not breaking. There's overload, there's adaptation, they get better, and you can come back and progressively crank up that intensity. So bear that in mind when I talk about exercises in this video. I'm using the word exercise in the broadest sense possible. So any training activity that we're exposing our athletes to. So I hope this video is useful to coaches out there and provide some food for thought on how we might more appropriately stress mental toughness, psychological preparation for athletes of any sport. But before we start, please beat the like button like it owes you money. Subscribe, comment, share, all that good stuff. And of course, let me know if you want to see another video in this series. So how should we optimally prepare rugby athletes for a forthcoming season? Number one is to define what elite looks like. Physically, tactically, technically, psychologically, and ask ourselves, what does the game demand of all these different areas? The second is that we have to break it down into its constituent parts until it can't be broken down any further and it can't be argued with. So for example, we could break the movement demands of rugby down into all of the activities that I've talked about. Accelerating, top speed, decelerating, getting up and down, changing direction, inside edge of the foot, outside edge of the foot, tackling, rucking, mauling, and so on. So just breaking everything down to the most granular level possible. Third is we need to come up with a valid and reliable way to define and measure the qualities that it is we're looking to enhance, because this is going to allow us to identify weaknesses and strengths and of course track performance over time to infer if the plan is working or not. If we can't do it objectively, at the very least, we're going to try and do it subjectively so that we can just understand where to allocate all of our resources. Fourth is we're going to ask ourselves, what are the required exercise or training conditions that are going to result in an enhanced performance of the qualities that we want to develop? So to give a simplistic example, we know that to improve maximal speed, we have to perform sprinting exercise at a minimum of 90 to 95% of top speed with the appropriate volume and rest between sets. Anything else is probably not going to get the job done. 5 is to identify training priorities. Where is the athlete weak? Where is the athlete strong? And how can we attack the weak link in the chain to try and result in the greatest possible improvement in performance per unit of effort and time. How much of the available training resources and recovery resources will that weak point get, and how much will everything else get? One is probably going to be a developmental training load. The other one is going to be a retention training load. And the sixth and final question we have to ask ourselves is, what is going to be the optimal organization of all of these training variables throughout the day, the week, the month, the entire preparatory period to result in the greatest sum development of the physical, the tactical, the technical, and the psychological at the time of the desired peak, namely the start of the season and through the season, and particularly into the postseason. How can you maximize this development of all of these qualities per unit of time or fatigue? There is only so much that you can put into the cup before it overflows. There's only so much you can do of each activity in the week before athletes start to overtrain and get injured. So for example, an efficient way to develop a variety of qualities might be if we use wrestling for conditioning, and we put an athlete against a well-matched opponent in rugby-specific scenarios that we can directly relate back to the tactical scheme that we're trying to employ in a game. We're going to make big strides in all of those areas at once, so it is a highly efficient training activity relative to the fatigue that we generate. Alternatively, we could spend a whole bunch of time drilling the technique of wrestling. We could spend some other time pushing a sled to stress the metabolic aspect, and we could spend more time on other activities that train the generic quality of overcoming an opponent but have no relevance to the technical or tactical scheme that we're trying to employ in the game. So for example, a tug of war looks very different to the contact skills that we've already discussed, but there's still an opponent there, so we could make the argument that we're developing the quality of aggression and competitiveness. The problem is we've generated way more fatigue and taken way more time to achieve those goals, and we've not done as good of a job achieving them as we could have done compared to the previous example. And ultimately, we need to be asking ourselves, is there a psychological weakness that needs to be addressed with this kind of activity, which we've said at best is only going to have a minor psychological benefit? And this is where I think we need to be asking ourselves a series of questions to try and identify where the weak link in the chain might be amongst the physical, tactical, technical, and psychological. The first question you need to ask yourself is, do the athletes know what the game plan is? Can they articulate it right down to first principles? Do they know what the objective they're trying to achieve is? If the answer is no, it doesn't matter how tough they are, they clearly have a tactical weakness that needs to be addressed. If the answer is yes, can they execute the full gamut of rugby-specific skills that that game plan requires, and can they do it to a consistently high level under ideal conditions? If they can't do it perfectly under ideal conditions, the skill is simply not there. If the skill starts to break down under intense psychological stress, yes, it's possible that there is a psychological weakness that needs to be addressed, but you're not going to do it with training like this for the reasons that I discussed. And lastly, do they clear the physical barriers to participation for the position and the level that they want to play at? If I'm 5'10" and 180 pounds, have I cleared the bar or the barrier to participation to be an international level prop? Absolutely not. Until I'm in the 6 foot region and I weigh at least 120 to 125 kilos, or about 275 for the Americans, it doesn't matter how tactically aware I am, what my skills are like, and what my level of psychological preparation is like. So in order for us to conclude that there is a psychological weakness, we have to be answering yes to all three of those questions. If you can answer yes, and you still suck, then it's possible that you have a psychological problem. But you still need to run through that same process and target the weak link in the chain. Which flavor of mental toughness is it you think you're lacking? How are you measuring that? How are you inferring that weakness? And what are you going to do about addressing that weakness? Congratulations on making it to the end of the video. Why don't you celebrate by watching more just like it? You can also help us on our quest to placate the algorithm gods by liking, sharing, subscribing, and commenting. Thanks.